Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Elizabeth Lewis, who has an incredible story coming from a traumatic childhood to a film producer to a coach and therapist and the founder of Elizabeth Lewis International. Elizabeth, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. I love talking to people about positive mindsets and just changing and shifting their mindsets and that sort of thing. But before we get into the conversation, just introduce yourself a little bit to my listeners to let them know, who is Elizabeth Lewis today.
Yes. So my name is Elizabeth Lewis, and I specialize as a performance executive coach. I have 2 graduate degrees in psychology. I'm also a therapist, and ultimately, I help type A entrepreneurs increase their cognitive awareness to advance their wealth and confidence. And I do this within 6 weeks. Typically, my clients see results in after 3 sessions. And I'm just really passionate about teaching people how to have that champion psychology, develop optimism, which is a whole other set of cognitive skills, and really change that narration, because sometimes we're dealt crappy cards.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? And
Mhm.
it's tough. A lot of times we want to use our past experiences or trauma as a crutch, not necessarily understanding how, you know, we can change our mind and we can change our path. And that's really what you're doing is getting people to be able to exercise their mind. I mean, I don't think a lot of people really view the mind as a muscle,
Mm.
and that it can be exercised and you can change years and years of learned habits, because most of what we do is learned habits. Not We're not born with all this baggage, you know so
Well, yes and no on that one. There are, I mean, generational curses, the religious communities like to say generational sins, but we can see that stuff does get into our genetics. I mean, we can, like, if you have anger issues and you don't have kids, you don't deal with your anger issues, you predispose them to have anger issues when you do start to have kids. So we always have to work on our stuff because it does get into our genetics. It's crazy, our DNA.
yeah. So what so you had a pretty rough childhood,
I
um
did.
and then you kind of went off on this path as a film producer, and then led yourself to coach and therapist. So just tell me a little bit about that journey, from
Yeah.
one step to then a film producer, which, I think, wow, that's really cool. And then now a coach and therapist, and helping, people set that, positive mindset.
Yeah, so I think, like most people probably in America and the world, I'd argue, I didn't have the best childhood, and there's a spectrum by all means. Just dealt with a lot of abuse, a lot of cruelty. Ended up moving out at age 16, and couch surfed. And I was blessed, I guess you could say. At 15, I became a professional model. My mom was like not a fan of that, so it quickly kind of got shut down. But I always had like a love for film and acting, and so I never was like a film producer in the sense of probably what a lot of people go to when they think of film producing. I was in the industry for about 10 years before leaving it. My specialty was more of the line production side, which does take some time to get up to that level. But I was in my last production stint in South Africa doing a wildlife documentary. I hated film. I hated the messages. I hated the lies. I hated the subliminal distractions that it does to us. And I was like, I just don't want to be a part of this anymore. It's also really long hours, and it's not it's very cutthroat, like a lot of industries. So if you don't love it, it's really not worth your time. And I had so much trauma, and trauma brain is kind of a word I'll use there. And I just wanted mental freedom. And I was so disappointed in therapists because I would sit down with them, I would tell them my crap, and their mouths would drop. And I'd be like, great, cool. Like, I'm aware it was shocking. Let's talk about how to change. And nobody could answer that question for me. They just wanted to keep exploring and keep exploring. And so one day I was sitting in church and I just felt prompted to talk to the person next to me, and they were getting their master's in positive psychology. And I was like, ooh, I'll do that. I'll fix myself. And so that was actually the goal. I'm a linear thinker. I like to understand how things work before I can really buy in. And so I went and got my own degree in positive psychology to fix myself. it just turned out I was really good at this, and it had a natural gift with it. And so my professors gave me their overflow of their clients. And I just started doing this professionally. I never intended to do it professionally. And then as I started to learn how to heal my trauma brain and rewire it and see change and see growth so quickly, I just kept absorbing and learning and digesting it all, because I was like, yes, I want the mental freedom. I want to get out of this mental torture. And all the rest is kind of history. Now I'm almost finished with my second degree, so I can be like a, I don't like to say licensed therapist, because the only difference between a licensed therapist and a therapist is one takes insurance and one doesn't, and one's controlled by the government and one isn't. And so I will soon be a fully accredited therapist, we'll say.
Nice. So when you first took that positive psychology course, um, you said you weren't planning on necessarily doing it as a living. So it was really at that point about fixing yourself. That's why you wanted to go there.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I've been going to therapists since I was 11, um, on and off, because my dad died when I was really young, and pretty much the rest of my family died, minus my mom and my brother right after that. And so I ended up getting an eating disorder when I was 16. And even then, like the psychiatrists and psychologists, no one could tell me how to change. And I'm like, I want to change. I don't want to deal with this crap. And so I went and just did the research myself and changed.
And at what point during that process um, did you find out that you wanted to help others, um, get past their trauma and, you know, help them get into more of an optimistic view?
I think I wanted to do it when I realized that I was good at it, and I just had a natural passion. Like I can't, like I have so many books, and when I moved last year, I had to give 300 books away, and it like broke my heart. And I'm a little angry about it, to be honest. When I started to see, like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was obsessive, I guess you could say, and like as an observer. And one thing that I'm passionate about, because I never received a lot of love, I was very sexualized at an early age, had a lot of sexual abuse at an early age too. I never want to leave someone feeling less than. I always want to encourage, like, you can overcome this, because the fact of the matter is if someone can overcome something, then you can too. And I just always wanted to leave people feeling better than they maybe felt before they were in my presence, not to be like arrogant or anything like that. I see how hurting this world is, and I didn't want to be a part of the hurting. I wanted to restore and encourage and build people up and love on people.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really, you know, part of why I do this show is that I feel everyone has a story to tell, and I feel that, those stories can inspire others. And, if one of my listeners has gone through anything close to what you have, perhaps this conversation will help them start that healing process and, you know, reach out to someone, um, because there's kind of that theory of, you know, safety in numbers, so to speak. And when you
Yes.
hear that someone else overcame something similar to what,
Yeah,
you've gone through in your life, it helps you get through that time as well. So, um,
I would agree.
what what was it, you said that you kind of found out that you were really good at it. Like, was there kind of an aha moment? Was there, a conversation with someone that, um, it kind of clicked, like, wow, I can do this, I can help other people? How did that, you know come about, if that wasn't your goal when you started taking the class?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I had to do some deep thinking as you asked it too. So I, you know, so part of living in a traumatic home is you learn to ignore your feelings and suppress your desires and your wants. I think some of it is survival, some of it is poor parenting, codependency, narcissistic parents, and trauma and abuse and so forth. I think I've always loved psychology. I've always thought it was really interesting. I'm a deep thinker. I like to understand stuff. So just kind of sharing that bias, when I started understanding how to effectively help people, I was really interested. Once I learned the action steps of how to rewire your brain, and do it in a way that everybody would understand, and once I started seeing how quickly I was changing from rewiring my own brain, I was like, oh, this is exciting. I want to share this with the world. I'm also someone who is extremely empathetic. I don't mean this to be conceited by any means. I mean this really honestly. I have not heard something from a client that I personally haven't walked through. So I can relate really well with people's pain. And again, like I just always wanted to let someone know like I care. And if no one was willing to do it for me, at least I could do it for someone else. Um, and I think that I just yeah, I don't know if it was like one moment, besides the fact that I also had like, so I was told I was stupid, fat, and ugly my entire life. And I finally had professors telling me, like, holy crap, I was great. Like, I ended up getting a 4.0. I just had so much positive feedback too that I was like, huh, maybe this is what I should be doing. And when I was in South Africa, I started kind of thinking big picture and like, what could God really put me on this world to do? And I started seeing where like helping people and talking with people and connecting was always there too. So I think all the pieces just fell. And then I was like, ooh, I like this. Let's keep learning.
Yeah, I love that. And then, as someone who's overly empathetic, I mean, is that it's almost like a blessing and a curse at the same time. Is it
Yeah.
not? Because you feel at like such a higher level, and sometimes there almost becomes a sense of helplessness in some cases because you can feel that person's pain as well, and as much as you try, sometimes you can't you know get them to where they need to be. So
Yeah.
as an empath, how how did you turn that curse into your blessing? It seems like you've been able to do that.
It's a great question. And I laugh because, whew, right, it is a blessing and a curse. I think it's easier to restrain, control, implement boundaries with your empathetic ways when you are not emotionally tied to a person. I think that is a lot easier to do. I'm a blunt, tactless person. I prepare my clients like I might say the wrong thing. Just give me grace and call me out. You won't hurt my feelings. It's taken me learning how to set boundaries, learning how to be selfish to a degree, which is very uncomfortable to even admit as an empath. Is it empath? Can't even say the word now. Because like I was always taught, like, I kind of had this like martyr syndrome as a kid. Maybe you had it too, of where it's like, oh, I can take it. I'm stronger than them. And that sounds like super arrogant. I don't mean it that way. Like, I'll deal with it. I'll move forward. It's okay. This won't break me. Let's just make their life better. And you enable people doing it that way. And
Yeah.
so I've also, I like to research. I've also researched like what makes people more successful in life. And it's learning how to hone that aggressiveness to be productive. So I've learned how to, through decades of trying this and it not going anywhere, I finally have accepted you cannot help someone who does not want help. You cannot. And that sometimes means you have to jump off the burning ship, even if everybody says you shouldn't be jumping off that burning ship because they don't really know what's going on. So for me, just to kind of summarize it, it's been boundaries. It's been realizing that, yeah, this life is hard. America has a delusional point of view. We are so on cloud nine with how life should be that I just want to backhand a few generations and people and expectations. Um, so it's also being emotionally mature because you're going to trigger people. I mean, I get triggered, right? And so if you can grow your emotional intellect to be like, to respond when someone says something that triggers you and kind of talk about it and share the meaning of what you're interpreting, I find that to be really successful. And just like when people get triggered, like taking a breath and say, okay, like, what did you hear there? What was the meaning there? Clearly that triggered you because it's your issue. It's not mine. I don't care at the end of the day. And so it's learning how to be like intentionally callous at times, which sounds hard to hear if you're an empath, but it's kind of how the world works.
Yeah. Yeah. And my mom used to always use a phrase where she said, sometimes you've got to do what you have to do for you. And it's,
So
you
hard.
know, yeah, it is. It's really hard because, as someone who's a giver and always wanting to, help others, it's tough sometimes to not do that. But like you said, I've had a lot of guests on the show, talking about, setting healthy boundaries and, understanding that you just simply cannot give and give and give. You have to be selfish at times because you cannot fill from an empty cup. So you got to take time for yourself and, you know, fill your own cup to be able to actually give more.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that um, can become a struggle at times. For
Oh
sure,
yeah.
to just kind of keep that into perspective. Um,
For sure, you have to learn the yellow flags and the red flags of people. I mean, American society is becoming more and more selfish, more and more self-absorbed. Narcissism is a spectrum. We're creating more and more narcissistic people. Um, you have to like learn those yellow and red flags, and then you have to affirm your own perspective. Make sure it's healthy, like do your best to like be objective about it. But at the end of the day, like we can't tell you in psychology, we can't tell you what a right or wrong perspective is. I mean, we can tell you the extremes, obviously, but we can't tell you like your truth, your past experience, what the meaning you make out of that. And so I've learned that like people are going to judge you no matter what you do. And people who are a little less self-aware like to use blamer language a lot.
yeah, yeah, that's very true. So when you're sitting down with a client and you're trying to, get them to rewire their brain and make them, understand that they can fix this, that yeah, there's a lot of crap that's been built up over time. What are some of your struggles as to, kind of, because I'm sure you get some people who are just like, you know, pushing back. They've got all kinds of, lines of defense for you to break through. Um, you know, what is that process like for you?
That is a great question. So, first off, I'm very selective with the clients that I work with because I don't do like traditional therapy. I don't trade my time for payment. So because I've gotten companies to the billion and multi-million pretty quickly, I do charge a pretty nice price, and it's just based off of the proof because I get my clients transformation so quickly. But in consultations, because if you don't trust me, there's not a darn thing I can do. There's just not. And I don't believe in wasting people's time or money. If you don't trust me, we can't do stuff. Now, if you don't trust me, but you're willing to trust me, if there's a willingness there, oh, then I'm totally fine to work with you and move forward. When it comes to rewiring your brain, though, this is where it's just very dependent on the person. Some people need understanding and need time to buy in. Other people are just ready to do it. They're ready. They're at that place to change, right? But when you work with a therapist or a coach, you want to work with someone who knows how to rewire your brain without you even knowing it's happening too. And so it's really important to find somebody who understands the education, the knowledge, and the background of the brain.
Yeah. And kind of, a lot of what you do is parlaying that into the business world as well.
Right.
So, um, because again, I think a lot of times when people are thinking of a therapist or a coach, they are thinking of just more of a one-on-one setting. But you're kind of sitting down with, the leaders to change their mindset, um, which I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that part of that process is them for them to go in and, change their organization's
Yeah.
mindset. So are you part of that process as well, or are you more just dealing with the leader and getting them into a mindset where they can, take what they're learning from you and take it to their organization?
That really depends on the organization. I find it hard to explain my profession, which I don't know if I should admit that, but I am. Just because everyone rolls out of bed and says they're a coach now with like very little training, and so it's hard to really articulate what we do because it's been pissed on so much. Part of my language there. I like to tell people if you've ever seen the Showtime show Billions, I do what Wendy Rhodes does. I work with you as much as you're willing to let me work with you. Because the fact of the matter is life does not happen when we sit down and plan it. Like when you're in a coaching therapy session, oh no, life is not happening. And so one thing that I offer all of my clients is you can reach out to me for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, because life doesn't happen in our session. So you need that person who's going to walk with you. And that's one reason I get transformation so quickly, is because when you partner with them, when you really partner with a person and move forward, you can get such transformational growth quicker versus, I don't know how many hours in a week, but if you take however many hours are in a week and you see your therapist or your coach 1 hour, well, odds aren't really great.
Yeah, it's a pretty small percentage.
Right, right. So it's just like if you want to overcome fear and you spend 1 hour a week working on like being fearless, and then you spend 4 hours that day watching fear-filled shows, like I can't help you.
Yeah. Yeah. The balance isn't there. It's not working in your favor. And I
Right.
guess that just goes, um, to life in general, where we don't, for whatever reason, we don't grasp, the terminology like garbage in, garbage out, like what you consume, um, whether it's through food or content or anything is really what is then coming out. And, to to make that shift of, if there's this much garbage and this much good stuff, to you know change that scale a little bit, I think is really where we need to start to try to direct, as a society. And that's a,
Yeah.
um, pretty tall task the way we are right now. But
Yeah.
by the same token, um, by having people like you and others on my show, um, I do feel there's hope. That there is, uh, more of a mind shift now. I mean, even as polarized as we are, as a country and as a world, I think there is truly a mind shift going on where, um, there's a lot of people who are tired of the garbage and, you know
Yeah.
tired of the negativity and trying to do something to create a change. I mean, do you kind of feel the same way? Do you see it the same way?
You know, I don't I think that's too of a binary question. I think it's complicated. I think in some areas, yeah, sure, there's growth, right? Like I think Netflix has articulated some changes that they're going to be making based on their viewers. It seems like people are more willing to listen. But with that said, like if you just take television for a second, and I don't remember the correct statistics, but it's something like 70% or 60%, it's either 70 or 60% of television shows depict violence. And like 70, I think, percent, 60 or 70% of those violent acts depicted show no consequences. So I think, and this is one of the reasons I left Hollywood, to be completely honest, is because Hollywood. So when I lived in South Africa, I very much saw how much Hollywood pollutes American psychology. Like, I mean, it just pollutes us. The irrationality is insane. I think in some ways our country is becoming so divided that it's kind of terrifying. And then in other ways, we're seeing people speak out. I think our, man, people are probably not going to like me for this one. I think we've become too sensitive, quite frankly. My dad was born in 1928. He had me when he was 61. Why you want a kid at 61, I don't know, but that's how I came to the table. My mom was much younger, and it's interesting to like observe the cultural differences between the Great Depression and the generation we have now, and just how easily impacted people are over the stupidest things. So, I don't know. I think as technology grows, we're creating more and more self-absorbed people too with social media. So I don't know. I mean, I think I think it's pros and cons. I think that and I don't know if really anything's changed, because are we just seeing all of this stuff because it's 24/7 now? Like, because we're just constantly plugged in? Has this always been that way? Is it worse because there's more people in the world than there's ever been? Like and this might be my analytical brain, but there's so many variables that I don't know if I can say it in a black or white manner. It just seems like there's growth in some areas, not so much growth in other areas. Wouldn't mind owning my own country and being like a multi-billion trillionaire. So it's like nobody, it doesn't matter what y'all's politics are. I'm safe. Go away from me.
Yeah.
That seems ideal.
Island. little island out in the Caribbean or something. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could never get in war with anyone because I'd be like, all right, well, white flag. Just want to live here on the beach by myself.
uh, that's too funny. But you're right when you talk about the uh, the hypocrisy of Hollywood and the violence that you know um, kids are consuming on a daily basis, on a regular basis, is pretty you know pretty crazy for sure. And
Yeah.
uh, again, if you're constantly seeing that, um, for the better part of your day, then um, that's going to be what you're feeding
Yeah.
back out into the world. So again, that's why I believe having guests on this show that have more of a positive outlook and being able to spread that positive vibe out into the world, even in small instances, is how I'm doing my little part to make a change.
Yeah.
So
And
um,
I appreciate that. And you know, it is true. Like, so you know how there's dating sites? There's also like sites for friends now because that's the world we live in. And I joke at myself because I had to do that to meet some friends, and it was interesting how negative people are. But I will say this: like the people who are really, really successful and have like done amazing things, it is amazing how they do not think about things falling apart. They don't think about fear. They don't think about negativity. It is insane to me. And so, like, if you're really wanting to switch your psychology and you're really not sure how, go find really positive friends that call you out on your crap in a loving way. And then, like, go for it because you can do it. It's just going to take work, but being negative takes work too. It's just easier because you've normalized it.
yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about the RV community and living in an RV full time is that
Mhm.
it is truly one of the most amazing communities I've ever been a part of. Um, so that definitely feeds my soul, to be able to surround myself with like-minded people who um, don't necessarily think that um, working a 9 to 5 corporate job, 40 plus hours a week is the best route to success. But there's other ways to do it
Yeah.
for sure. And that's again, I really love that community, and it goes to prove what you just said. Surround yourself with those people, and it'll
Mhm.
change a positive mindset. And just the fact that we've become a society that um, lacks connection so much. Like even like you just said, talking about dating sites, but even friend sites. Like um, and again, maybe it's a generational thing, but like just get out there and talk to people. And what's funny is I've always been very introverted by nature. I'm not into small talk. I'm not, back when I ran my organization, I did not like networking events or anything like that. But now being part of this RV community, I find myself a lot more outgoing and extroverted and willing to talk to people. And having a golden retriever who thinks that everyone was put on the earth to pet him
Of
helps
course.
break those barriers down
Of
as
course.
well. Believe me. um, but it's funny. Like if you're looking for the good, you will find it. That's really what it comes down to. If you're looking for the good, you'll find it, and you really have to turn off mainstream media and turn the TV off a little bit and just get out there in nature and
Yes.
take it in and enjoy God's beauty that He's given us. And
For sure.
it's
Easier said than done because it's so simple. It's so simple. Life is so simple. And that is the biggest issue with people who are fear focused or negative focused is they live in the future and they live in the past. They don't live in the right now. And people who have that champion psychology, they live in the right now. It's insane. So simple.
yeah,
So
yeah.
hard.
Like I said, take the advice of a dog.
Right.
Are in the moment creatures 24/7. They're
That's
not
it.
worried,
That's
not
so
worried about
true.
what just happened. They're not worried about what's going to happen. All they care about is right here, right now. That's the only thing that concerns them. So that should be, you know, the the leader for your new clients is like, okay, I'm going to teach you how to live like a dog.
True. It's true. It's so true. And so I love to study like champion psychology, warrior psychology, performance psychology. And I have a good friend who's the like 1% of the 1% of Delta Force, you could say. And it's really fun hanging out with him sometimes because it's like he read all of the psychology books on being a champion and a warrior because he just like walks it and it's very like, whoa, this is so weird. And what I'm learning is when you can really focus in the right now, in this present moment, and just let go of expectations, let go of the future, let go of the past, literally forget the past. It's insane how satisfying your life can become because it's only in the here and now that you can make decisions for the future. Because, like, I don't know if you do this, but how many times, Dan, have you said, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this today? And then, like, an hour passes and everything blows up, and you're like, well, there goes my plans. Now I have no idea what I'm going to do.
Yep. Yeah, it's like the old Mike Tyson quote: "Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face."
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, step back. What do we got to do? But yeah, it definitely happens. It definitely happens. So yeah, I mean, being in the moment is such a key, I think, to really
Oh,
appreciating life.
I think it's the secret to life. The more I study it, the more I practice it, the more I'm like, you know what? That squirrel's not worrying about anything because it's just chewing on its nut, not thinking anything other than its bloody nut. So I'll just do the same thing. And so it's learning how to control your mind in the sense of like letting thoughts just go, practicing acceptance, redirecting. I mean, I always tell people like if you can work on yourself and not have a job, that's a huge blessing. It's a huge blessing because it takes a lot of energy to work on yourself mentally and then have to be a parent or a spouse and an employee or employer, right? Like it's a lot. But your psychology is what everything runs through.
Right. Right. So what's your advice to people who are trying to, balance that juggling act of, again, work, family, their own mental health, all that stuff that's being thrown at you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say my advice for not knowing like any variables or where you are is give yourself grace, do the best you can, be honest with yourself. And when you can't be honest with yourself, if I like to say if more than two people are saying the same thing, you're the common denominator. Like wake up. Like it's your issue. Okay. If especially if there are multiple people that don't even know each other saying the same thing about you, pay attention to that. And that's the other thing is you need to have someone who's going to give you that blunt, honest truth. Because when you love a person, you're honest with them. It's easier to lie to a person than to be honest to a person. But also trust yourself. I'm learning too, and I don't know if it's just a byproduct of the clients that I work with. But a lot of people struggle with codependency, and when you struggle with codependency, you're not in touch with your feelings. So you got to get in touch with your feelings, especially if you're an empath too. You've got to like do a timeout, cut all the umbilical cords tying you to stuff just for a second, be like, what do I want? What do I like? What do I need? Where am I ignoring myself? And then you've got to just take steps of faith because you're not going to have a guarantee of going in the direction that you think is best for you. So if right now, if all you can read is like 2 pages in a self-help book, great. That's awesome. Keep up the good work. But just figure out where you're lazy and making excuses and where you're being avoidant because that just leads to more suffering. We've proven this. Religions say this. Like, I don't know how many more facts you need to realize that, but don't go in the avoidant direction. Be proactive.
Yeah. Yeah. And love what you said about what I always like to refer to as being able to surround yourself with people who can give you some tough love every once in a while. And like I said, call you out on your BS when it needs to be. And, you know, do it in a loving manner, and I know, um, I come from the sports coaching
Yeah.
background, and you know, one of the things when I was playing is like you knew if if your coach stopped pushing you at that point, you knew you were beyond help. It's like
Yeah.
if they gave up on you, like you might as well just quit at that point. So, um, being able to have somebody there that's willing to push you and move you ahead is very important. So, we're just about out of time, but before I get to my last question, anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about before we go?
Well, I'll just say this to that last comment you said, because man, sports coaching teaches us so much about life. I think that's one of the best. I encourage everyone to go to a psychologist or a therapist or a coach who understands sports psychology, because there's so much wisdom in it. But you have to remember that when people are tough love to you, it might not feel or come across at love at all. And this is where you have to just trust your global relationship with that person, right? Because like a bully can give you tough love, but if your history with that person has always been cruel, no, don't trust it. But when people call you out and you feel insensitive and triggered, that's your issue. It's not theirs.
Right. Right. I love that. I love that. Elizabeth, how do people find you if they want to reach out and get any of your services? Where can they find Elizabeth Lewis at?
We can go to ElizabethLewis.com. That's my main website. And I'm very active on LinkedIn, which just look up Elizabeth Lewis. You should find me pretty easily. And then on Instagram and Facebook, you can find me at Elizabeth Lewis Coaching.
Awesome. Love it. So that brings us to our final question. And as you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People, Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes. So what's one of the little things that Elizabeth is doing to make the world a little bit better place?
Oh, that's a great question. My like heart and body just got like goosebumps. That's sweet. Sorry, I have to geek out about that. One thing that I am consciously working to do is when people like interact with me, I just want them to feel love. Like I tell myself, like love oozes out of my pores. And I'm very mindful when I talk with people to not diminish their self-worth. Like, because I think sometimes people talk to us in a way that's like demeans our existence. So I do my best to give people respect and love and kindness, even in the face of conflict, because you can be loving and firm. You don't have to attack a person's worth to get your point across that you feel you're being mistreated.
I love that. That's a great answer. For folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. Be sure to head on over to Amazon, pick up a copy of my latest book, The Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1. Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. I really appreciated this too. You're just a delight. Love it.
Thank you.